Okay, we've just seen the theory behind the resilient system. So now we're going to go through the process in a real setting. We've got a bathroom situation here, and we'll just point out some of the issues that need to be addressed with this floor. So the first thing that we need to ensure is that there's no breaks within the existing floor. This is because we're going to use a wet process for the preparation of the surface, and it's really important that we don't allow liquid to ingress underneath the floor. So we've done a review of the floor, we've examined it closely, and we found a couple of areas where the welds are split. So these need to be addressed before we can progress. So if we have a look where these areas are, they're immediately beneath the basin. We can see that clearly there's been some liquid spills here, and the surface is swollen, and there's now a split. And in fact, in the neighbouring basin, that has a very similar issue as well. So what we need to do is to clean the surface and lightly abrade it, and then we can fill it with the Resilient PU filler. This is a unique product. It comes with these tips, and the PU material passes through the tip and mixes with the hardener, and then the material is extruded, and it sets very quickly. We're then able to abrade it flush with the surface before we then continue with the wet preparation process. Right, with all the gaps and splits filled, we've got a consistent surface, it's all intact, we're ready for the next stage. And as I mentioned during the presentation, having the surface really clean is very important here. I know the history of this particular floor, so we know which type of maintenance products have been used, but of course in many cases you might be presented with a resilient floor which has been maintained with wax-based polishes, polymer products, things like that, and all of these need to be removed. So the next really important stage of the process is to give the surface a really thorough clean, and for this we'll be using the Bona Power Remover R, and we'll also be using that in conjunction with an abrasive of some sort. Now the type of abrasive that we use depends on the surface that we're treating. In this case, the floor is a rubber safety floor, so it has got a significant texture which gives it slip resistance. So for this reason, rather than using the diamond abrasives for the wet sanding, we'll be using the resilient brushes and a Bona scrad pad. And this will serve to get right into that texture and make sure the surface is super clean, nicely abraded, and there's no trace of previous maintenance products. So I'm going to mix up the cleaner then. So this is, today we're using it 1 in 5, but in some situations where the floor has a thick build of polish, you may well need to use it in a slightly more concentrated form. This can be determined by doing simple tests beforehand on the floor to see how strong you need to have the cleaner. This is particularly important if we're treating linoleum floors. If we use the cleaner too concentrated on these, then there is a possibility of discoloration. So again, these tests to determine the optimum concentration are really important. With the floor that we're dealing with today, this textured safety floor, we've noted that the welds are still intact, but some of you may have noticed that there's a build-up of dirt where there's a slight texture. So again, the wet cleaning is going to be really important at removing all of this. And then eventually, when the treatment is completed, there's going to be a lot less of this texture. So we would expect, following the treatment, that the floor will be easier to clean in the future and not suffer in the same way. Okay, I'm going to apply the Power Remover R in the diluted form, and we're just going to let this sit on the surface and work for a few moments. So it's going to start to dissolve any residue from maintenance products and polishes, things like that, as well as serving to give the surface a really good clean. Quite important that we apply this product liberally. We don't want it to dry on the surface once it's diluted these maintenance products that I've mentioned. Okay, with the Power Remover R having worked for a few minutes now, you see we haven't left the surface to dry. It's still nicely wet. This is good. So now we're going to brush the surface with the Bona Resilient brushes. These fit onto our Power Drive Connect plate with a clip system, and they're firmly held in position. And as I was saying, these bristles are abrasive enough to actually scarify the surface, but also the filaments will get right into all the texture, so we make sure that we're not missing any areas at all. So we're going to use this for the main body of the floor, and then we're going to use a hand sander on the edges and the uprisers using a Bona fibre pad. This is a new product for Bona, and it's essentially intended for use on bare wood, but we've been trialling it for the Resilient system in terms of preparing the surface, especially where we have these textured products. So that will be used for the bits that we can't get to with the buffer. So following the use of the Resilient brushes, we're now going to go over the surface with the Bona Scrad pad. Attach the single disc red pad, and then the weight of the machine just keeps the Scrad pad in place. This is a 320 grit abrasive, and again it deforms around any contours, so it gets into all the nooks and crannies. Okay, with the floor nicely clean, we've had a powerful fan on the floor now for about an hour or so, just to make sure that it's as dry as it possibly can be. This is a really important point. So with the surface spotlessly clean, braided, we're ready to apply our first coat of colour. I've already mixed this up, so I've used a blade on a drill to mix it with the hardener. It's the only way that you can mix the colour. So we can see that for the second coat perhaps. But now we're just going to go ahead with the application. So once it's all thoroughly mixed, we leave it typically about 5 minutes for it to begin reacting. And this is an important property because it's going to optimise the adhesion of the colour coat onto the existing surface. So we're going to carry on that, and my colleague Ian's going to help. Okay, the first coat of paint is now completely dry. We've checked over, and in some areas there's still some of the previous surface showing. So we're going to put a second coat on now. So first I'm going to mix the paint up. For the second coat, we're going to put decorative chips in the surface. This is an effective way of not only making the surface more attractive visually, but also if you've got a subfloor which is slightly undulating, it takes the emphasis away from that and gives a more uniform looking surface. So we're going to scatter these manually, and of course we've got the uprisers in this particular situation, so we have to be careful to make sure we apply the chips to the wet paint carefully. Okay, so we're on the final stage now of the process. The chips have been applied, as you saw. The surface is now completely dry, and now we're going to apply the final clear coat. For this, we're using the Bona Pure. This is a matte finish, and Bona Pure has the best chemical resistance of all of the products in the Resilient range. So of course, within a situation like that, that's going to get lots of wet cleaning, it's the perfect material to use. So just a single coat is going to be required in this environment, but in some situations we could apply additional coats if we wanted to, or in fact as part of the ongoing maintenance for the floor we could apply additional coats at some point in the future if we see that wear is occurring. So by addressing any wear to the surface before it's progressed too far, we'll be able to avoid the full refurbishment which we've undertaken. So I'm now going to mix this up. Again, it's important to note that with the Bona Pure, we can't just add the hardener and shake the bottle. The hardener, in fact, is too high in terms of its viscosity, so it won't actually mix sufficiently if we just shake it. So we're going to have to decant it into a bucket and then add the hardener to mix. So I'll do that now.